you were working for Sky Sports as this very popular team right up until August 2020, months before the vaccine rollout. Suddenly you were off air. The media reports at the time said Sky Sports is just freshening up their lineup. But explain what happened, what you were told before you were let go with Sky Sports, having been with them before that for so long.
Yeah, I'd obviously for a few months been questioning the decisions that were being made by the government. I was questioning the reporting by the mainstream media of the stuff that we were being told. It was quite clear to me, given the repetition and the 24-hour coverage of it all, that it was clearly propaganda. And I was calling it as I saw it, which is what I've done, which is what I've made a career out of in terms of my punditry in the football world. And I just decided to carry that over into what I was seeing in the normal world as well, and that didn't go down too well with the bosses at Sky. I think I was probably the first person to refuse to wear the Black Lives Matter badge on Sky after the George Floyd incident. I wasn't comfortable. I knew what the organisation stood for. I had to wear it once when it was thrust upon us about a minute before we went on air one Saturday afternoon. And I questioned it at the time, and my producer just looked at me and he went, I said, do I have to wear this? And he just looked at me and he said, well, it's probably in your best interest if you do. So that was quite clear to me what that meant. However, I wasn't comfortable, and after that show finished, I took the badge off and I handed it back to the producer, and I said that will be the last time I ever wear that badge. It's been on my mind all afternoon, not happy with it. I said, if you want me to wear any other badges, the kick racism out, all that kind of stuff, I'm more than happy to do that. And I don't think that went down too well. That had got a little bit of publicity. I then got warned about a couple of other tweets that I'd sent, which kind of implied that the clubs in the relegation zone were trying to get the season null and void in 2020 when they were trying to get the season back up again and get it finished. There were some teams in the relegation zone that were actively going out their way to tell everyone that they had COVID cases, and they were basically trying to get the season ended so that they could get another season of Premier League money. I got a warning about that. And so it didn't really come as a major surprise when the phone call came to say, I'm afraid that the reason I was told was that the programme is going in a different direction. Those were the words that they told me. And there was no more work for me at Sky Sports.
Now, that's interesting because I think it was Paul Merson who came out and said that, again, you were given warnings, as he mentioned, but that maybe if you'd, and I'm not throwing Merson under the bus, I know he's a close friend of yours, but maybe if you'd have just shut up about it and not said anything about it, you'd have still been employed at Sky Sports. But again, right. I guess if you'd have told people to wear masks and stay at home and take the vaccine, right, maybe they wouldn't have let you go. Am I correct in thinking that?
Probably doubled my wages.
And you mentioned also, which I wanted to get into, was the BLM thing. Because, of course, this was all happening. The mass marches across the world were all happening at the peak of the pandemic, the first wave, when we were all told that we needed to stay inside because of the deathly virus. And yet, in New York, in other major cities in America, you literally had nurses and doctors coming outside of their hospitals to applaud people for mass gathering in the street in numbers of tens of thousands, because apparently protesting against that was more important than the virus. But we all had to stay indoors. People had to miss cancer screenings. Of course, we now have 40,000 people who missed their cancer screenings, many of them dying. But with the BLM issue, this, of course, intersected with football, with the whole divisive, I think it was incredibly divisive, take a knee gesture, which, by the way, Matt, 2 years later, some teams are still doing it, and it looks absolutely ridiculous because of course, now they've kind of put it by the wayside and said, we're only going to do it for special events, FA Cup finals, etc. But I still see matches where like half of one team starts doing it before the ref is about to blow the whistle. The opposition doesn't want to do it. Nobody really knows how to react. It looks awkward. It looks embarrassing. The optics look terrible. And again, it ties into what I've talked about. Same category as things like clapping the NHS, flying a Ukrainian flag. You know, the intention might be good, and you've talked about this, obviously, with comparing it to the Kick It Out campaign and all that. But these things become hijacked by the powers that be. They become kind of loyalty oaths to the regime.
Yeah.
So, you know, clapping the NHS becomes tacit support for vaccine mandates, for lockdowns. Flying Ukrainian flags becomes tacit support for prolonging a war 1,500 miles away, which may not be in our best interest, given that people can't even afford to pay their energy bills right now. And this is a point I think that you've talked about in the past. Take a knee became tacit support for BLM. It wasn't an anti-racist stance. What do you say in response to people like Gary Lineker, others who have attacked you on social media, who asserted it until they were blue in the face that take a knee was nothing more than an anti-racism gesture and had nothing to do with Black Lives Matter as an organisation?
Well, I'd probably like to just say to them now, all this time gone by, can they point me to any substantial evidence that gesture has made a single bit of difference? Because I don't see it in my life, I don't see it in the life around me, and if anything, I would suggest the opposite has happened, that it has been, as you said, more divisive than it was bringing people together. And it was interesting, actually, the psychology that was used behind it, because I don't know if you remember, but when crowds first started coming back to football, because they started taking the knee when there was no crowds in, and when they first started doing it, when the crowds first came back, it got a terrible reception. However, the behavioural insights team obviously got to work on the psyche of people, and all of a sudden you were a racist if you didn't clap people taking the knee, and so obviously everybody then had to clap, and otherwise you'd be a pariah in society, and you were a racist because you didn't agree with the gesture.
Get early access to videos, exclusive live streams, and personally DM me. You've seen how much I get demonetized all the time. Well, this is how you support me. By subscribing at pauljosephwatson.locals.com. Please click the link in the description.